Actually is a great summation of the Saints offense. It's just a bunch of bodies being rolled out there wearing Saints uniforms. Mitch Tischler is joining us, typically 5 o'clock on Tuesdays. But with the bye week, we're shaking things up, mixing things around. And thus, Tischler Tuesday has arrived early. Mitchell, how are you? How was your bye weekend?
Bye week was fantastic. Nice and relaxed, ready to get back to it here for a nice little playoff run.
Yes, indeed. I want to talk to you about expectations here in a second, but I know you and JP had Dan Quinn on the pod during the bye week. What was your biggest takeaway from that conversation on the Beltway Football Podcast?
Honestly, that dude is a football guy through and through. Lots of people are in love with football, but find an outlet outside of their time in the facility to do some other things, whether it's golf, bowl, read, play Pokemon, whatever it is. And Dan Quinn is just through and through into football. Asked if he was going to try and get away a little over the bye week to take a breath from everything he was doing. And he's all in on the game and all in on this team. And quite frankly, if he was a player, I might be concerned about some burnout or, tired mind, tired legs, all those different things. But this is a guy that's been there, done that. He's been through the rigors of an NFL season, and the fact that he's still going this hard during the time off for the team tells me that this is a guy who has high expectations and is really looking for this team to do something.
So Mitchell, I am going to need DQ to take some time off to read at some point because this is not a bit. I gave him a book. There was a book that I was reading that I thought he would really enjoy on like mindset and a lot of the stuff that he talks about in the book. I think attacks a lot of that stuff from a similar aspect to how he thinks about it. And as I was starting to cover the team or cover Quinn this summer during training camp, and he's kind of laying out his vision, I was like, this is a lot of the stuff is in this book. I'm gonna see if DQ's read it. And he said no, but it's been on my list. So I gave it to him after a game a couple weeks ago. So Mitch, I need him to take a break so he can read this book. I guess after the season's fine, but like I eventually want my book back.
I got to be honest. If it's semi-related to football in some capacity, there's a chance he's into it.
Okay.
So very well, his off time might have been, reading about leadership and all the different things that book read about. So you never know.
There you go. The book I think is called Toughness. It's by Steve Magnus. If anybody wants to read it. Eventually, I did make Dan agree to do like a book club podcast with me. So eventually, he's going to be on our show, or he lied to me, in which case we'll deal with that later. All right, Mitch. The question that we were asking folks before you got on is: have your expectations changed for the Commanders? They started 7-2, obviously. Now sitting at 8-5, coming out of the bye, in the 7th seed with a 1-game lead over LA and obviously a couple-game lead over some other teams that will compete for that final playoff spot. So knowing what we thought coming into the season and trying to kind of balance the long and the short term of it all, would you say it's disappointing if the Commanders do not ultimately make the playoffs as we sit here right now?
Absolutely. It'll be disappointing. From the beginning of the season, I think, expectations were, hoping for a bounce back, maybe double the win total from last year, maybe get to finishing above 500, but, and maybe make the playoffs, I guess we're probably at the high end of the expectations. But then as you start getting into the season, I think, expectations change from making the playoffs to can we win the division? Then the lull came and it was, can we make the playoffs? I think the bounce back against the Titans, kind of, again, alters where your expectations are for this team. But it's been a little bit of a roller coaster. And I think when you have a team coming off a season as bad as last year and all the changes and everything that happened, I think that if you would have told Commanders fans at the beginning of the season that they'd be in the catbird seat for a playoff position, I think everyone would have been excited about it. And quite frankly, I think that's where the team stands right now, is that they are in a great position to make the playoffs. And, they're sort of 2 games up on everybody. The Rams are, 7-6. The Commanders are 8-5, but they have a better record in the conference than the Rams do right now. So it's kind of a 1.5 lead right there. At the end of the day, they control their own destiny, and that's all you can ask for as a club. Expectations wise, though, you have 4 games left here, and if you go 2-2 in that span, with the Eagles, Falcons, Cowboys, and obviously Saints coming up, I think you got to feel pretty good about your chances, because the Rams would ultimately have to finish 3-1 to catch you, and they have the Niners, Jets, Cardinals, and Seahawks. Obviously some of those are winnable games, but I think they're in a position where they shouldn't settle for anything less than being a playoff team.
I 100% agree, and I think they feel that way, which probably should tell us something. I know Dan yesterday got a little. I don't know what you were in the room, so you can tell me whether it was fake snippy or real snippy when Scott Abraham asked him about looking ahead in terms of hey, that's not how we do things around here. But if they were being honest, like they think they're in great position. And the other thing, Mitch, I think is the schedule. Just making sure that they stay focused and against a team, for instance, like the Saints this weekend, who is not very good and is going to likely be starting Jake Haener or Spencer Rattler at quarterback, or a very, very banged up Derek Carr. So how much trust do you have in them to really handle their business in the way that they have for most of the time this year? But there was also the Cowboys game that maybe pokes a hole in that armor.
And that's the thing. Losing to the Cowboys is never a good thing. So any positive that I'm trying to point out, taking away from it, is minimized by the fact that the loss was to the Cowboys. But I do think it was a wake-up call for this team, and I do think that the air of invincibility and Jaden Daniels is going to be the best player on the football field. I think went away when they lost that game to the Cowboys, because quite frankly they're a better football team than them, and it's something that shouldn't have happened. And I think for the coaching staff and the players both, it was a wake-up call. I thought they stiffed the smelling salts, and you realize that you can't take any team for granted. And I think the bounce back against the Titans was a really big bounce back and a really good reassurance for the guys that, hey, we are this team, we are good enough to go in and blow out anybody. And you got to do that against the Saints. The same thing that we talked about when they played the Cowboys. This is a team that's reeling, and their quarterback situation is a mess. Who knows who they're going to start. You mentioned the three guys that are on the roster. They also signed Ben DiNucci, who I think they're the Commanders then, maybe Washington Football, when he was with the Cowboys. Actually, let me phrase that. The Commanders beat them the year that they went to the playoffs and played all the bad quarterbacks down the stretch. That was 2020. I guess they were a Washington Football team then, but they're not going to have a premier starting quarterback, and Alvin Kamara is a good enough football player that he can wreck a defensive game plan and cause some problems. And we've seen the Commanders have some struggles, in the run game, particularly with guys getting room on the outside, which is something that, Kamara does a really good job of. So there's certainly nobody to overlook, but that's a team that you got to put away early, and you got to remind them that, hey, your season's over and we're still playing for something real. We need this win more than anything.
Yeah, Mitch Tischler with us, Beltway Football Podcast. Of course, here on the Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. As we've talked about a lot this year, the game flow, the formula, the script, whatever you want to call it, that ability to just get up on a team early and let them have it. If you can do that against the Saints, they turn one-dimensional. Like you should win that game in blowout fashion, in the way that you won a lot of other games in blowout fashion in a league that doesn't really lend itself to blowouts that often. How experimental do you think that they'll get defensively in this game with Marshon Lattimore? One, do we expect him to play a full complement of snaps? And two, is there a noticeable difference in the amount of man coverage that they play and the amount of pressure that they send with him out there for the first time?
I got to be honest, I don't think the defense is going to change a whole lot. I think that we've seen throughout the season, Joe Witt and Dan Quinn really try a bunch of different combinations and different players in different places to kind of see what fits. I think they're going to try and play to his strengths, which may lay a little bit more in man-to-man, but I don't think they're going to change the tenor of the defense just because Marshon Lattimore is back. Certainly it's going to be a fun storyline, with him going back to New Orleans, and, to a much, much, much lesser extent, I think folks will be interested in Chase Young, being here or playing against, the team that drafted him. But quite frankly, that's much further down the storyline list. Last week or 2 weeks ago when we talked to Joe Witt right before the bye week, he had mentioned that, he wasn't really going to talk too much about Marshon Lattimore until he got full complement of practice in, and that means, playing team, which he hadn't done to that point. Dan Quinn talked about him running full speed this week and expecting him to get involved. And so I think he'll get, pretty close to a full complement of plays. I mean, I don't think that they're going to put him in there if he's not ready to play yet. We've seen that, based on the last 3 or 4 weeks out of him. But as far as how the defense is played and what they call, I don't think I see that materially changing because, these guys have turned up the pressure defensively as the season has continued and really, gotten much more stout on that side of the ball. And I don't think they want to kind of change up the expectation and change up, what's been working from them in places. I think it's more Marshon Lattimore's an additive, not a game changer per se for them.
And then what do you think they wind up doing at the other corner spot? We're all, I guess, guessing because Joe Witt has said, I'm not going to talk about it. And I don't think Dan, I think Joe will be like, we'll see on Sunday. He'll give a kind of more cold answer where Dan will smile and do his Dan Quinn thing where and then eventually be like, yeah, why would I tell you that? I want to give the Saints an advantage. And it's like, well, you're correct. I'm not going to be mad at you for not answering that. But what's our best guess, Mitchell, on whether it's Mike Sainristil outside opposite of Lattimore, they bump him back inside, Juste, Michael Davis, the rotation that they've been doing. What do we think they do out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sainristil's played well enough, particularly as of late, to deserve the chance to stay on the outside and continue improving at that position. I think you're going to see Lattimore on one side, Sainristil on the other, and a lot of Igbonghene in the slot there. And then obviously I think that next group of players, the Benjamin St. Juste, Michael Davises, will rotate in and out because neither Lattimore or Sainristil are going to play every single defensive snap. And then obviously as they rotate through nickels and dimes and different formations, you might see them all on the field in different capacities at the same time. But when we talk about base, I think it's going to be Lattimore, Sainristil, Igbonghene out there. And quite frankly, I think that's the best combination of three that they have. Because when you look at what the Saints offense does, a lot of multi-tight end sets, not a lot of, 3-4 wide where they really want to spread out a defense. They have all those different tight ends that they rotate in and out. Quite frankly, I think they're all about the same player, just have different names, heights, and weights, but none of them are particularly more scary than the next guy. So I just think it's a collection of bodies that they roll out there. And, I think this is going to be a big Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner, linebacker, Jeremy Chin type game because those guys, they love to run those tight end routes in the middle of the field, and those guys are going to have their work cut out for them.
Yeah, that actually is a great summation of the Saints offense. It's just a bunch of bodies being rolled out there wearing Saints uniforms, which honestly is
different heights, all the same player.
Yeah, which is also like the first 30 years of Saints history and Archie Manning. So
exactly.
Derek
Carr is kind of your modern day Arch, right?
Not really. I mean, Arch was pretty darn good, and he was super mobile. That was the thing. Like he had to run around because he didn't have anybody blocking for him. But like he was also pretty good at it. Derek Carr's not like he's not unathletic, but he's not Archie Manning level athletic.
I guess I was thinking more in the compile a lot of stats and don't really actually ever win anything of any true value. Was the kind of direction I was going with it. But yes, you're correct.
Yeah, I think in the annals of NFL history, if you're doing an all-time quarterback draft, you're not going to get to either in the first 100 or maybe 200, but you probably get to Archie first. All right. Mitch Tischler, it's the Beltway Football Podcast. It's JP Finley. It's out multiple times per week. You can check it out wherever you get your podcast. They also do a live show on the Monumental Sports app post game, so you can check that out Sunday from New Orleans after Saints and Commanders. Mitchell, thank you as always, sir, and we will talk to you next Tuesday.
Always happy to come on with you, Craig. Hope you guys had a good bye week and are ready for hopefully another 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of NFL football here with this Commanders team.
I will take as many as they will give me. Thanks, Mitchell.
Thank you.